This is uncomfortable for Sunak because Craig Williams isn't just any aide. He is the PPS, but he has been seen by Rishi Sunak's side basically ever since he first ran for leader. He is one of, if not maybe the most loyal of Rishi Sunak's aides. And so I think Sunak will be particularly pained personally by this story and the possibility that it will cause difficulty.
Let's get our 15-minute briefing on the day's politics, business and sport. We will start with politics, believe it or not, with Lara Spirit, the Times Red Box editor. Morning to Lara.
Morning, Asma.
It feels very much that listeners to Times Radio and people watching the debate on TV actually enjoyed this one more than previous ones, which is good because you want everyone to be engaged with this kind of stuff. I read, I think it was in the Times, that Keir Starmer, but people were concentrating on him. It felt that way, and that Rishi Sunak was kind of fading into irrelevance. Is that fair? Is that what you thought?
I think there was certainly the sense in some of those present, especially behind the scenes, were saying that there was more attention perhaps paid to the Starmer answers than the Sunak answers. I think that doesn't necessarily signal a disinterest in Rishi Sunak, but it certainly does signal that Keir Starmer was under much more pressure last night than he has been at any point in the campaign so far. There was much more scrutiny on both his previous support for Jeremy Corbyn and on the possibility, some would say probability or inevitability, of tax rises under a Labour government. And I think particularly pressed on that wording around no plans, around taxes for working people, exactly where that line will be drawn on the possibility of particular tax rises under a Labour government was something that Starmer was pressed on by Sky's Beth Rigby repeatedly last night, and he was visibly quite uncomfortable in that moment as well. And then there were personal questions too. There were questions of character. One of the audience members asking him if he was a robot was, I think, perhaps the most humiliating moment for the Labour leader last night. And I think because people are expecting now, given the polls, that he has a very good chance of winning the election, they are perhaps more likely to be watching his answers very closely. I think comparably, when Rishi Sunak made that promise that flights would be off the ground to Rwanda, people aren't necessarily going to be hugely interested in it if they believe that he's not going to be around to keep that pledge. So I think it does reflect perhaps a belief in a sense that the polls might well be correct. And I think it's not necessarily the strangest thing that on those questions Starmer hasn't been clear on before, perhaps, that he's being pressed on them and people are listening.
Rishi Sunak was struggling as well, defending his and his party's record on immigration and NHS waiting lists. That's become quite, he hasn't quite communicated the fact that they are going down a bit, and they have gone down since the peak, which was 7.8. For some reason, he's just not quite getting that across, and I don't know why. Because if you say something's gone down, you have to explain how it's gone down. There was a bit of heckling. Who got more hecklers?
Well, I think there was one quite conspicuous laugh at the suggestion from Keir Starmer that his dad was a toolmaker. And the reason why it's curious that people laughed at that is because very often when journalists complain, and I've done this, and hearing that refrain thousands of times, you'll hear from senior Labour advisors, well, most people don't know that. Almost everyone doesn't know that. You're a journalist, of course, you know that, and others don't. But actually, the fact that a very sizable portion of the audience last night did laugh at that rather suggests that actually that's cut through now, and it might actually be cutting through to the point of maybe suggesting it needs to not be repeated so frequently. But I would say that Rishi Sunak unmistakably was laughed at and on occasions booed in ways that Keir Starmer wasn't last night, particularly when making quite basic political points, which I think is pretty concerning for the Prime Minister.
Yes. Now, a lot of focus today on the Labour manifesto. We're not expecting any big surprises. It's pretty much what we've already what's already been trailed. Why would there be any kind of crazy rabbit in the hat now for the party that's way ahead in the polls? But I do want to ask you about Craig Williams, who's an aide of Rishi Sunak, who's in a bit of hot water because he placed a bet on the date the general election would be held. What's going to happen over that?
Yes, so the Gambling Commission has launched an inquiry into this bet, which was reported by The Guardian. He placed a £100 bet on a July election just 3 days before Sunak named the date. Now, this is uncomfortable for Sunak because Craig Williams isn't just any aide, he is the PPS, but he has been seen by Rishi Sunak's side basically ever since he first ran for leader. He is one of, if not maybe the most loyal of Rishi Sunak's aides. And so I think Sunak will be particularly pained personally by this story and the possibility that it will cause difficulty. Williams also fighting what is now actually a pretty marginal seat in Wales. So it's not great news, I think, for the party, and they'll wait to see what the Gambling Commission does.
Okay, Lara, thank you very much. That is Lara Spirit. She's a Times Red Box editor. Straight after this, she's off to write her election newsletter. You can get it free every day into your inbox. Just sign up by searching for Times Election Newsletter.
Chris says, when did the Times get all virtuous about politics? It's a game. Starmer had to play the game to be in with a shout of Labour leadership. Would you resign if you had an awful boss but knew you had a chance of succeeding them? But I don't think politics is a normal working environment, because politics has to at least pretend to be about things like principles and beliefs and honesty. It's not the same thing as just sucking up to a boss you don't like. It's a question of going out there and stumping for them and saying, this is the right person to lead our country. I think it's a bit different.
I think you're right, but for some people, politics is just about naked ambition.
Yeah, maybe it's naive to be, maybe we've had a week of naivety where we're saying we want honesty, we want people to actually stand up for something they believe in, and maybe it's never been that way and never will be.